The SPT Realism Mod, a nearly complete overhaul of Tarkov mechanics that make for a truly hardcore first-person simulation on a Windows PC. Having recently been updated with the much-anticipated Hazards expansion, it even includes clouds of toxic chemicals and radiation from toxic waste and hazardous equipment for the player to contend with. For many of us who have one or more editions of the Stalker series installed alongside Escape from Tarkov, this upgrade is a welcome addition to the gameplay in SPT for several reasons. First of all, the measures for toxicity and radiation exposure have been present in Escape from Tarkov since the beginning and were never given any purpose. Players assumed that the numerous hazardous waste sites and obvious zone-like places in the game would be made into radioactive dangers to be avoided or used as traps, myself included. These additions to Realism Mod are very welcome and finally give meaning to a number of aspects within the game. Now, don't be intimidated. I realize that the Hazards update put more on the pile for users that already struggle with the health and medicine overhauls, but I promise that it's all very intuitive. Most gamers will have instincts to inform them about these new mechanics, as they're present in other games like the Stalker and Metro series. As long as you know that areas contaminated with hazardous waste, meaning discarded chemical containers and radioactive equipment, are dangerous and require breathing and body protection, you're on the right track. Before we get into the specifics of the Hazards update, let's have a quick rundown of Realism Mod's main influential features in SPT. It's a hardcore overhaul for Escape from Tarkov, designed to make the game into a more realistic simulator with added and adjusted mechanics, lots of them. It comes with an external tool that must be used outside of the game and provides toggles for many of the changes it makes in-game. The mod also has an extensive entry in the Espionage menu with values for nearly all of its aspects not shown in the external tool. Be sure to keep Realism Mod's file-based page handy to check through the tabs of its features. You'll need to reference it from time to time. Same for the release notes of the most recent version. The developer, Fontaine, keeps thorough documentation for each release to help us learn the ropes, which is all but necessary for mods like these. The SPT Realism Mod makes changes to weapon handling, attachment stats, thirst and energy recovery, injuries and healing, traders in the flea market, bot spawns and loadouts, player progression, and more. Assume that every kinetic operation, each business transaction, and all bots are affected by some change logically designed to make them more realistic, which often translates to a higher difficulty in some way. In general, the traders will have reduced inventories and higher prices or costs, especially when it comes to healing and repairs or insurance. The flea market will have prominent blacklisting, and the offers generated will be fewer or more random, making it difficult to source items and equipment. Even provisions are changed, in that they no longer have an instant effect, but instead regenerate hydration and energy gradually, with some items given the potential to cause food poisoning. Let's discuss the Realism Mod's Medical and Health Overhaul. This is likely the most discussed feature of the mod, and the one most often toggled by new users, once they figured out how to do that in the first place. Be advised that this overhaul is controlled by the mod's external config tool and can be disabled there, but it may be unsafe to disable it for a profile that had already been using it for some time. In that event, it's best to start a new profile with the new changes you've made to ensure that everything will work as intended. Of course, this is recommended practice for all intensive mods. With the overhaul running, injuries and firefights become more severe. You won't want to risk trading fire much anymore. Medkits no longer directly recover HP in raid and are used to stabilize oneself by stopping bleeds and splinting fractures. Bleed and fracture damage can be recovered, but not HP lost to an attack. However, medkits will still restore HP outside of a raid. The vitality skill determines how much of that bleed or fracture damage is repaired across the body. Surgery kits restore the HP of the part they're used on up to 50%, whether it's been blacked out or not, even including the head and chest. Tourniquets cannot be used on the chest, stomach, or head, and will slowly hurt the HP of the part that it is used on. The Calog B must be used on those parts instead. Furthermore, most medkits will act as tourniquets on the limbs, while the clotting agents work elsewhere. Gear, like armor and backpacks, can be made to restrict the ability to heal injuries beneath them and will need to be removed before aid is applied. This is disabled by default and can be toggled freely. A notification will appear in the event that healing or consumption is blocked and there's a default hotkey, P, to quickly unequip all obstructive gear. This means that headgear blocking the face will prevent eating, drinking, and taking medication and will need to be toggled. Fractures on the head, stomach, and chest can no longer be healed in raid. Heavy and light bleeds will be removed automatically from limbs under the tourniquet effect, and light bleeds will stop if a heavy bleed appears on top of it. Your remaining HP, energy, and hydration affect the speed of most actions, movement speed, and weapon recoil. Damage to the legs and chest slow the walk and sprint speed acceleration, just like arm damage reduces ADS and reload speeds. Failing energy directly slows all action and movement, while failing hydration hurts max action and movement speed overall. Your current HP affects the loss rate of energy and hydration, and current stamina affects reload, aim, and stance speeds. Exhaustion, dehydration, and light bleeds will not kill the player, but will reduce HP to a set percentage. An adrenaline effect is added when taking fire, direct or otherwise, and melee damage, causing temporary tunnel vision and tremors. If any of these visual effects make it difficult to see or play the game, they can be toggled or adjusted in the external Realism Mod config tool, or its Espionage entry. There is a subtle regenerative mechanic to this health and medical overhaul. Fall damage not exceeding 12 HP per leg, 75% of barbed wire damage, and blunt damage not exceeding 4 HP will all slowly regenerate on their own. Using provisions to treat exhaustion will restore HP lost to the last exhausted state, unless the character becomes exhausted again. Health regeneration is fully cancelled if you're shot or hit by an explosion, take over 17 fall damage, or take over 10 blunt damage, including regeneration from healing items on open wounds. Now for Painkillers, as they also enjoy heavily adjusted mechanics. They each have different ratings as shown in the pain relief strength stat in their descriptions. Different injuries cause different amounts of pain, and more pain needs greater strength. The meds take effect after a delay, and their pain relief comes in waves, with periods without any painkiller effect. Stronger meds have a shorter delay and relieve pain for longer. They can be stacked to treat lots of pain, but their debuffs stack as well, eventually leading to an overdose state with greater consequences. If you wouldn't slam an entire bottle of ibuprofen in real life, you probably shouldn't do it in this mod. Just like with all other recovery items in SPT with Realism Mod running, be sure to check stim descriptions to know their adjusted effects before use. They've all been rebalanced to suit situational needs with side effects that kick in after their buffs wear off. Like pain meds, the stims can be stacked for their effects, but it still includes their debuffs and can easily become a problem without moderation. Taking 2 of the same stim will trigger the overdose state, and those effects change for each stim type, which is shown in their description, so be very careful if you should find yourself with an abundance of auto-injectors. And finally, for the changes to provisions, hydration, and energy. Eating or drinking restores the body gradually instead of instantly adding to the hydration and energy pool. Realism Mod honors the lore of Tarkov and adds the chance that any food items found are likely spoiled to some extent and may be toxic, causing food poisoning. This can be treated with Augmentin, the AI2 medkit, or the antidote stim for a quick fix. Even the sugar content of a food item now changes its effect in your body, with high amounts leading to an energy crash, causing the stat to drain more quickly after the initial boost. Eat and drink with care for safety in regards to potential toxins, and also because their buffs and debuffs will stack as well. I've made sure to cover this health and medicine overhaul in the Realism Mod because it is required for the mod's hazards update to function, and it will be in effect at all times. If the overhaul is disabled, the hazards will not work. The two must act together, and they do so very well to make SPT much more immersive. The system will feel familiar to any who have also played games like the Metro or Stalker series that require the player to use functional gas masks and clean filters in hazardous environments. To be clear, this mod does not add anomalies, monsters, or random esoteric effects of any kind. The hazards update includes zones with toxic gas and radiation directly caused by aspects of the environment that we've been playing around for years. In the Norvinsk region, there are many visible dump sites and signs of radioactive equipment. The developer, Fontaine, has finally given these assets and more a complete purpose. With the hazards update running, there will be random clouds of toxic gas and fixed zones of radiation that the player will need to watch out for. Both are invisible, meaning that the Geiger-Muller counter and gas analyzer will need to be equipped in order to detect them. That's right, these two very old items truly function at last, making the appropriate sounds when they go off and giving you a chance to avoid exposure. What's more, the toxicity and radiation values present in the character health tab now have a purpose. They will show when exposure damage is taken, and their values will need to be carefully managed to avoid any ill effects. Wear gas masks and equip them with filters to protect yourself against exposure, keeping in mind that none of them offer complete protection, just like in our world. As long as the filter is still operational, they come with counters now, gas masks will provide enough protection to avoid permanent damage. However, it's important to know that exposure damage works differently than other maladies in the game. Firstly, even with the appropriate PPE, long-term exposure will cause debilitating, potentially permanent effects to a character. The effects of toxic gas can be more easily treated than exposure to radiation, and there are different methods for that treatment. The AI2 medkit is the go-to for treating toxicity in the body and helps radiation as well. Even vodka can be used for some relief from radioactive exposure, as seen elsewhere in the genre. But radiation becomes an existential threat much faster than the effects of toxic gases. Under 30%, it's entirely treatable, but it becomes semi-permanent at any higher value. At that point, radiation sickness will prevent the exposure rating from healing properly, only working downward to multiples of 10. Fortunately, Therapist has been given 2 new quests that provide complete recovery for the player if they should need it, with 2 required tasks to complete beforehand. If the sickness goes untreated, its debuffs will get worse and worse, eventually resulting in a total HP drain. So keep those masks on and fill your pockets with cheese. These mechanics extend to the player scav as well, and any ill effects from exposure will persist across raids. If you've installed the latest version of Realism Mod and aren't sure if it's running the hazards update properly, there are a few things to check. Firstly, you should be able to equip the Geiger counter and gas analyzer to the special equipment slots. They can't be set there under normal conditions or if SPT's load order creates a conflict. For example, if any mods that affect special slots override Realism Mod, the counter and analyzer will be blocked from these slots. Then be sure that the gas masks have a new slot for filters. You should be able to drag and drop them in. It won't take long to find your first hazards, so start a raid with all of your equipment to test things out. A gas mask should create a visible overlay when equipped now, and you should be able to hear your character breathing within the mask, adding to the load on your senses. Move around the map with the Geiger counter and gas analyzer running until they sound off. You'll likely encounter gas before radiation, as their zones are generated randomly in certain areas. Without a mask on, your character, and all others in the game, will begin coughing to warn you about the spicy air you've just entered. Radioactive zones are always fixed and fit the context of their local area, meaning that you should see signs of potential radioactive waste or equipment nearby. When the detectors go off, you've reached a toxic site and should leave it as soon as possible. Monitor your exposure ratings in the health tab even if you weren't exposed for long, because you've likely taken some small effect that won't require immediate attention. Be sure to treat any exposure damage to ensure that it doesn't accumulate and debilitate your character. Even extraction sites can be toxic, so be prepared if you'll need to remain in one for any length of time. It's clear that these changes were divisive in the SPT community at first, but I love them all. I think that the mod provides sweeping enhancements to nearly every aspect of Escape from Tarkov, and that's very enjoyable to me. The improvements, overhauls, and new features improve both gameplay and immersion for me tenfold. If there's another content creator as into this mod as I am, I don't know them and they certainly don't know me. Of course, the more intensive aspects of Realism Mod can all be toggled in one place or another, so it's still possible to play with a lighter configuration for those that want it. Make absolutely certain to read through all the tabs on its description page to prepare yourself for the changes. It's also wise to check each new version's change notes, which are always provided for us. If you'd like to interact with players who use the mod frequently, they can be found on Discord in one of our servers, links will be in the description. I also see a lot of discussion about Realism Mod on the SPT subreddit, which is a good place to go for information as well. Let me know which aspects of the mod you'd like to learn about next on this channel. I'm currently working on a new comprehensive recoil comparison between vanilla SPT and Realism Mod's recoil overhaul, which should be coming soon. Perhaps we should take a deeper dive into the trader and flea market changes, or even the adjusted weapon stats, comparing things like ergonomics and comfort. And that's all on this for now. I hope this video has been helpful or informative for you. I've been taking my time to make it, what with all the recent updates to SPT and Realism Mod itself, wanting to be sure that my information wouldn't immediately become outdated or irrelevant. At the time of this recording, Realism Mod is just about to make its way onto SPT 392, and I'm very excited for that, especially since most of my mod list has now been updated and the time is nearly right to take that leap. Hopefully everything will go well and I'll be back soon with more videos in the latest versions. Now go forth, freshly prepared to take on Realism's hazards with confidence and have a great time. I certainly will be. Thanks very much for watching. This project was rather intensive and took a lot of time to complete, all whilst working on other things. Like the video and subscribe to this channel for more SPT content. Patreon supporters and channel members get access to extra content and priority votes on what mods are reviewed or studied. You can find us in the Club StarVox Discord server for more SPT action any day of the week. The SPT Pub Discord server is still the primary source for information on the project and its mods. Don't forget that the SPT developers won't be keeping old versions on the file base any longer, so keep backups of any builds that you want to keep. Club StarVox thanks the SPT development team and all mod developers for their work. We are your biggest fans on planet Earth.